Hello, everybody. My name is John Cachet. Thank you for attending the AS9145 software demo. We have a very interesting list of attendees, large and small organizations from around the globe, and we appreciate that. Have some housekeeping things to review. Because of the number of people on today's sessions, your phones are muted, but I would like to answer questions. Actually, would prefer to answer questions over just presenting. So please use the question block. A copy of the presentation is available already. If you go to your GoToWebinar menu bar, you'll see a couple attachments, but they're already available. And for those that attend, a certificate of attendance will be provided. AS9145, we're not really going to try to go through and explain it in detail. This is really just software, so hopefully you're already familiar with this spec. What we really want to talk about today is how a group of volunteers in the automotive industry got together and created an APQP PPAP app that is much, much better than spreadsheets, but not as complex as some of the other highly engineered PLM, ERP, or enterprise quality management software in the marketplace. So what I'm going to share with you was an application that was designed by volunteers that use spreadsheets every day to author documents and try to manage this process. And they clearly stated at the beginning of the project that they love spreadsheets. They're not anti-spreadsheets, but they also hate them. And what they wanted was a solution that would enable you not to break linkage between forms, that could not accidentally delete rows or columns or mess up lookup tables, but also have the spreadsheet-like flexibility to modify forms and how the process is managed. So what we got together was a group of tier 2 and smaller companies that were using Excel daily to do this effort. And intentionally left out the OEMs and the primes because it was really geared towards tier 2. The automotive industry identified tier 2 as smaller companies' risk. But then big companies started to show interest, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But what we're really hoping for from this event is, as you listen to this and go through this, we want to know if this solution might be helpful to the aerospace industry. Now, one other comment, there's been some rumors bouncing around on LinkedIn and some chats going on that, 9145, don't really need it. We got new product introduction. We got first article inspection. They're bouncing around. But according to the SCMH, these organizations are incorporating APQP into their product development process. The requirements from what I've heard are already flowing down. So it's here, it's real, and hopefully this will give you some ideas about how to move forward with it. So they love spreadsheets, but they hate them. In the initial survey, 85% of the companies were using spreadsheets, and that was large and small companies. So from OEMs and primes down to tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. And again, the issues they didn't like was I break the forms. I put an operation over here and it didn't make it over to this form. I changed an op number, it didn't make it. The reporting's horrible, across multiple standalone files. Can I just find out, what I'm working on? There wasn't really any project management, task management. We're going to talk about that because the small companies really wanted just task management, not a full project management app. There wasn't really error checking in it, even automatic spell checking. There wasn't really version control and more. So there are a lot of things they didn't like. And what they started to talk about was, I need help with all the projects I'm assigned to or I'm part of, whether I'm the team lead or just a participant. Where's an easy place to find that? I really need a place where anything that's assigned to me or my to-do list, I can get like with a single click. One of the volunteers described, I have the same part number under 3 different rev levels in a PPAP process going out to multiple customers. Doing that in a spreadsheet was just very difficult. Can I import, export my stuff? One of the volunteers said, look, I'm corporate. I have it's 3 locations. but I have to manage PPAP and APQP activity going to customers. I have to do internal, and I have to get it from suppliers. Again, that's been very difficult going across the entire supply chain. And this frustration about breaking linkage and everything is just, how do I make sure the DFMEA, the process flow, PFMEA control plan are all connected? They use the term, because they're thinking Excel, I want to do a file save as. Hey, the way I do it now is if I have a similar part in a similar product family, I just do a file save as and modify it. So that kind of capability. And then, of course, one of the classics was, I get asked all the time, is the PPAP approved? Can I ship the parts? And you would think, again, his comment was, you think that that was such a simple question, but it's difficult. It's hard to answer when you're trying to manage, I don't want to say a complicated process with 9145, but it's not trivial. So, the various forms are starting to show up. I got this out of the AESQ website, examples of a process flow, the PFMEA control plans and whatnot. So, but I also found other versions. So various primes have published their own version, and they're not really different. They're just kind of different. And that's the same thing going on in automotive, where, well, this customer wants it this way, this customer wants it that way. And that's the flexibility that the volunteers liked in Excel is, look, if they want to call it this, I'm just going to go in and change it. I don't care. I'm just trying to make parts. The other thing that was very surprising is one of the volunteers said they hired 10 interns this summer, and only one of the 10 knew how to use Excel, which, I'm an engineer. I grew up in automotive. I spent time in aerospace and various industries. That's just, it blew my mind. You go, what do you mean they don't know how to use Excel? So part of the challenge was just training people on how to use these forms. So because of the larger companies on today's call, I've added these two slides, and I usually don't put these in, but I mentioned to you it was designed for tier 2 and smaller companies, but the OEMs and the primes are coming to the table. And here's something I just want to explain to them. If you look at how we computerize stuff in manufacturing, the first thing was accounting. The CFO approved it. They wanted to get the books done faster. That makes sense. The accountant said you had too much inventory. So then we did MRP systems. Engineering got some help with CAD systems, then PDM systems, PLM systems. Then the shop wanted better scheduling and execution, so we threw in some MES. Marketing and sales got their Salesforce, CRM, SRM capability. But there's still been this thing in the middle, whether you call it environmental health and safety, enterprise quality management, whatever, that's still kind of floundering about where does this thing belong. And if you go one step further, and if you just look at PLM engineering and the enterprise quality apps and what 85% of the industry is using to do 9145, there's a big gap. And this is what was important. I used this presentation at a large global tier 1 automotive supplier. And when I showed this and we talked about it, the light bulb went on. And here's what the challenge. The research and development, the tech center, the people designing systems, they're the ones, especially in big companies, that need a big, robust system like that. They need a DFMEA tool that knows there's a system and a subsystem and a component. We've got a plane, and the plane has an engine, and the engine has turbines, and all that detail and that logic. But the people that are making parts, the plants and suppliers making parts, they've been really trying to say, I need to do a PFMEA process flow control plan. I'm doing it in Excel. I'm trying to, maybe some of them are using Microsoft Project. Some others have said, well, we tried to put it on the K drive, but then the folder order didn't make sense. And then they tried to put it in SharePoint, but that wasn't just on and on. Here's the point of this whole thing. And I've heard this over and over. The small guys say, look, they design it, we build it. And when you look at the capability that's needed to do this, that's what they're trying to focus on. The other interesting comment, as I've been speaking with the larger companies, I've had, oh, I don't know, maybe 10 or so come to me and say, John, this slide, this deck is exactly what we experienced. We spent millions and millions of dollars on these very robust systems and failed. And they said, oh, it must be the software vendor's fault. We'll try another software vendor. Guess what? It failed again, and it failed again. And when they say bridging the gap on the slide deck, what we're trying to say is, if you're going to take somebody from Excel and put them in a robust engineering, it's probably going to fail. But if we can take them from Excel and Microsoft Project and put them in a baby step, that 2 years, 3 years from now, we can move them up, that would be time and energy well spent. All right, so let's look at the software map that I want to go through with you. Part list has part characteristics, process characteristic, and operation numbers. Those are feeding all the forms for the DFEMA, the process flow PFEMA control plan. Gauge studies are available to support control plan information. But once I have these parts that I'm going to make, then projects drive the task list that the vendors wanted, the volunteers wanted, and the forms. There's some other stuff added, and we can go through and talk about that when we start to show you the software. Now, I'm going to try it a little different today. Several of you, and thank you so much for doing this, several of you sent me questions ahead of time, and I'm going to go through and try to answer those questions. And if you have more, please type them in the interim. But we're going to take a stab at just kind of, instead of just flipping through a bunch of menus and tabs, to just answer some of the questions you have. So this is the home page, what it looks like when you log in. The icon at the top is basically just walks you through the idea of how to navigate the reporting engine, the home page, the capability on it, sees your calendar, the widgets you can move around and can change, your task, the part file, and again, that's where you put in all the part details, part number, rev level, upload product and process characteristics information. Projects is where we navigate through the APQP and PPAP projects, and you can have multiple projects for the same part number at different revisions. Track what's going on from you to your customer, internal ones, and from you to your supplier. Gauge studies is a library, and the biggest thing on this was not necessarily having to do the gauge studies in the app, because a lot of people were using other software to do that, but they wanted an inventory of reusable studies that they can use over and over on similar part families and similar product and process characteristics. And then the actions one, and this action one is pretty important because one of the biggest questions from the volunteers, and it was asked a couple of times by people attending, is how do I find out what's assigned to me? So this action tab basically takes you there. One click says, here's all the tasks that are assigned to you. Here's all the projects that you're part of. And of course, from here, if I want to go to the task, I can click on it and it'll take me directly out to that task. So that was one of the things that people really wanted. It's just difficult in the multiple Excel sheets. It's difficult in the various ways we're doing it, is to just find out what's working for me. Now, the follow-up question to that was, well, if I'm assigned a task, will I be notified? And the answer is yes. You had the ability to go through and set those up. So here's a list of projects. Again, the Excel-like functionality was, I want my part name over here. I want my part revision over here. I want my part number over here. The ability to just change this like Excel. The ability to sort by part number. The ability to sort by part name. The ability to filter. If I said I only want to see the work that's being done in Cleveland, filter and sort by them. So a lot of the functionality what they liked about Excel. So on this project, when we go into it, here's the task list. Now this is where I said it was interesting. The majority of the volunteers said, I don't need a Microsoft project, start date, end date, percent complete. I just need to know it's assigned to cache and when you want a date on, or an end date on it. So the bare minimum was this list, and you have the ability to edit directly from this list. So if I want to change, when the due dates are, you don't have to use these if you don't want to. The capabilities, again, just to kind of use it as a spreadsheet again. That's what they wanted. Now, the interesting thing they also said is, this got an error that my planned end date is before today's date. What they also wanted was the ability to start by who is responsible, sort by start date and end date. So all these comments are editable, what priorities are available. So this is a very, very simple one. But we did have one volunteer that said, no, I use Gantt charts in every one of my management review meetings. I use them all the time. So the compromise was, okay, here's the Gantt chart if you want to see it. If you just want to see, and I'll go in and edit one of these. If you just want to see like a smaller version of that, let's go into measurement system analysis, and we're going to make percent complete. I don't know, do 50% and save it. So I have the ability to see the start and end dates and complete. If I want a short version of that, I can do that as well. And if I want nothing, I can do that. So then the question was, well, I mean, depending on the project I'm doing, I have different tasks that I use. They're not all the same. So can I create task templates? I'm clicking over on the wrench on the right now, going into admin. These are all the admin and lookup tables. And yes, there is a task template library. So this is where you may use some of your checklists. This is where you can build out the APQP task list. Again, however detailed you want it. You can actually, do the phases as top, and these are subtasks. So you can create it any way you want. So yes, you can have different tasks. You can have this prime task list, this prime task list, this prime task list, internal supplier. You can create as many of these as you want. And then when you go back into projects, the way you bring those in is you click on the edit, you go into task, click on the edit mode, and this gives you the ability to go ahead and create and edit those any way you want. Now, if you want to add some, we have the ability to copy them from a previous project. That's kind of the file save as capability that they liked. You can copy it from that template that I just went in, or of course you can just always type them in and add them anytime you want. Okay, so one of the other questions actually wasn't from a participant. This one just from a previous participant is there automated workflow? Is there automated workflow that says this task will be for that task, and this one has to be done and the answer is no. The volunteers, when they're looking at this, that complexity, first of all, we don't want to take the time to set it up and manage it, whether it's people doing the forms or the IT department. It also says I really don't need a place that or an app that's filling my email inbox with a bunch of stuff. What I really want, I'm going to go back to that first button, is that I can go into an app and I can just get everything assigned to me. You give me that, I can sort by end date, I can sort by start date, I can do percent completion. Give me that. I don't need automatic workflow. Now, the other one that was mentioned is the ability to do PPAP to customer, suppliers, and internal. So this is the PPAP or project detail screen. We were on the task screen before that. This is where I go into the edit mode. And this is where I pick, it's from a supplier to a customer or internal. If I toggle that over to supplier, it'll come off the supplier table that's in the database, and I can also put in cross-reference to their part number, rev, and rev date for consistency between the parts. So yes, we can do that. Now so we got tasks done, we got assignments done. You can do Gantt level, start, plan, actual percent. You can do real basic, just spreadsheet lists and create them. But the document authoring capability is where a lot of this starts to come together. So this is where, if I go into edit mode, They say, what process am I using? We'll take out 10, which is fab. What characteristics am I doing? Appearance. And we'll just keep adding a couple more below those. This one isn't appearance, this is dimension. So again, this is all built from the table file that is in the part screen. And if we have time, we'll flip over that and show you that as well. But the biggest thing on the no break linkage thing was, okay, I put this in the process flow. It should show up in the PFEMA, right? And it does. And it should show up in the control plan, right? And it does. In fact, what the volunteers realized, this tab called CTS View, is that the process flow, PFEMA, and control plan is really just one big old database. So if you want to see them by form, and you want to change by form, you can do that. But to make sure there's no broken linkage, you can go to CTS View, and you can see all the fields across all three of those forms and see how it's all connected. So let's go back in the process flow. We want to make sure we don't break anything. If I go into this guy and I say, no, I'm going to make that op 15 and save it. Again, op 15 should be in the PFEMA. Op 15 should be in the control plan. And so wait a minute, that's out of order. This should be up here. You can drag this up and move them around to make sure they're consistently used. And then the CTS view, again, is where I'm able to tie all that together and bring all that together. Now, the other thing that was added is, I don't want to call it intentional breaking linkage, but the volunteers described how what they do internally to run their business isn't necessary. Well, how's the best way to say this? It has information in it that's not necessarily part of the standard process flow. It's not a risk item for PFEMA. It's not part of the control plan. So they wanted the ability to go ahead and turn that off or intentionally break it, which means, no, it's all in the CTS view. It's all there. But this is a process node, maybe in receiving. It's something that I want people to worry about. It's not a risk item. I'm not controlling it. I'm just trying to communicate it. So you have the ability to do that as well. So it's like, okay, so I can change things, I can move things around, that all makes sense. I can move things around if I need to and combine things around. What about modifying the forms? You know, because we mentioned when we had that spreadsheet, those clips of the forms that I got from the various primes and whatnot. You have the ability to, this was showing the automotive one, we can use an aerospace example that calls things differently. That's fine. You know, process number instead of operation number. You can change it any way you want. And I want to show you how to do that because this was something that the volunteers really wanted because they did it in Excel, but they didn't have this kind of capability. In Excel, they would do a file save as, and then hopefully remember whatever file save as they used and the changes they made, they could reuse it again. And again, depending on how you store it, you can't always do that. So what they liked and what they designed was in here, again, I can change where the fields are displayed. Are they across all three? Again, if you want to change operations to process sequence, you can do that. And I mean, you can change any of these. The other thing they said they'd like is it's not really just changing the columns. Some people add columns that aren't in any of the forms, so they have the ability to add new columns. And with this add new column, what we're seeing a lot is trying to tag, I'll just put failure costs instead of warranty, trying to tag the risk assessment to what the costs are. And what they're doing with that is, you know, we thought it would never happen. Well, it did, and it cost a lot of money. We thought it would never happen. Well, it did once. I mean, and it cost a lot of money. We thought it would never happen. Well, it happens all the time. It doesn't cost a lot of money, but it happens all the time. And again, you can click on which forms this goes in. Do you want to see it in the process flow, the control plan, and the PFEMA. So a lot of flexibility in how to manage these forms and put these forms together. I'm going to go back into the project screen and take a look at that. So back into projects, I'm going to go back into my demo record, go back into forms. And the aerospace example now will have that failure cost in it. And I'll just look at process flow. Failure cost has been added. Process sequence has been changed. So again, a lot of flexibility in how you build that. One of the other things that was very cumbersome for people was just the submission process. And this is again where the automated workflow came in. And they said, well, can we automatically, in fact, the developers just said, don't do anything automatically. Humans can make those decisions. Humans can put them together. Just make it easier for the human to do what they're trying to do. So with that intent, when we go into the project again, there's a publish project button. Now what this guy does is it brings up all the tasks, and this is where you can say, what do I want to publish out to the particular document? And when I publish that, it brings all the attachments, all the forms, everything you've built, puts them in a zip file, and makes it easy for you to do whatever you want to them. Whether you're going to email that to the customer, whether you're going to put it in your PLM app, wherever you want to put it. So whether it's an APQP status report, a PPAP submission report, the ability to do that. So we've seen a lot of lookups. And I want to go back into admin quickly, because one of the other questions was, the problem we have is inconsistent. I'll just pick on control methods. Inconsistent use of control methods in Excel, which, one will say first piece, the other will say initial piece. One will say control chart, the other will say XBAR chart. One will say machine vision, the other one will say automate. So it's inconsistent. So they wanted the ability to develop these tables for everything. Failure mode, effects of failures, process controls, to get reusable, consistent use of those tables, including part classifications. So if you want to see your critical items, you want to see your key characteristics, again, consistent use of that terms makes reporting, viewing, and documentation and everything much easier. This didn't come up in the pre-event questions, but it was interesting because I saw it on one of the Primes worksheet that they gave out to their suppliers, and that was the meeting log. Now, again, this is interesting because not everyone, the small guys said they need a meeting log, but if you have the need and your customer is asking for, keep track of the kickoff meeting, who attended, what was being done, when you started, who the attendees are, who the organizer is, again, any attachments, any action items, you have a place to put that. And if you want to get a little more fancier, you can also keep track of the various team leaders. People entered here can be a team leader, a team member, and a stakeholder. Again, just for keeping track of that. So a lot of capability to go through there and put that together. One of the other questions that came up was searching. Let's go back we'll go into parts for a minute. We haven't been over there. The ability to go in and say, I'm looking for a bracket. I don't remember the part number, but just be able to search across that, of course, was put in. But then once the volunteers saw that, they said, well, wait a minute. Sometimes I have stuff that I don't even remember where it is. And I want the ability to do bracket across the part number file, across the project file, across everything. So kind of a global search that lets people go through and put them together easy. So these are all the tasks with it. Here's all the projects with it. I don't have a project on it yet, but you get the idea. The ability to go across global capability. One of the other admin functions is let's start getting them now. Okay, we're starting to get questions coming in. Again, please, I was just doing questions that were pre-sent, but let's go ahead and if you have questions, type them in. One is not all projects require all the APQP tasks. There's an assessment functionality which will lead you to the correct task for a project. SEMH again has an APQP applicability matrix that does this. I agree, it's great. You're going to see some at the end of the this presentation. IAQG has all sorts of resources that if you don't know about them, please use them. There's a request to go back to the PFMEA template. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go back into projects. I'm going to go back into a project record, click on a form button, and then I'll click on the PFMEA. So operations, process, requirements. I don't have demo data on all of these to build them up. The characteristic classification, this is where you saw the critical item and the key characteristics, process controls. You'll find the layout to be very similar. The words may have changed a little bit, but the documents are the same. Now, when I click save on this, one of the things, again, that they liked in Excel, first of all, I'm going to click on this, go to full screen mode so we get some more real estate we can look at. I want to go in and find all the dimensions. Again, the same kind of sorting and searching capability. I want to move process over here. I want to use a spec over here. So a lot of spreadsheet-like capability. I want to, let's go ahead and put in some capability numbers. But the ability to go through and sort and find all these. You can sort by RPN, you can do it by RPN. Now, once I build these, I know this is going to come up if it's not already, the ability to, let's stick with the PFMEA as that was requested. Let's go ahead and you can print or export. This is the header information for the form, and I can send it to Excel. Interesting enough, most of the small companies said if you send it to Excel, I'll take it over from there, meaning that they'll use this as a report writer. So the ability to put all those together was part of it. It can go to a PDF as well, depending on how you want to send it, put it together. Okay, next quick is reporting. So let's go up to the reports tab. The reports right now are pretty basic. By the way, every time there's I just showed that printer icon, there's a printer icon on parts, on projects, on tasks, on gauge studies. It's everywhere. So you don't have to go to reports to run a reports, but this is a reports tab. So a lot of filters. I only want to see a particular location, a particular status, start dates, end dates. I can either get a list or I can get a detailed report, you know, any particular family, and then same ability. I can send it out to a PDF, a spreadsheet, or a CSV file. Same kind of capability for projects, same capability for gauge studies. And again, what part of what I'm hoping is, I know I'm going quick on here, but I want to be cognizant of our time limitations. If there's anything that I'm not answering or you want to know more, please email me. I'll give you the email at the end. But also the ability to hear from you about, I don't know if it's going to work or not work. Okay, another question. Is data stored locally or cloud-based? It can be both. We know that right now we are hosting it for automotive in a Microsoft Azure cloud infrastructure. Microsoft does allow ITAR compliance capability. It's a little more expensive, obviously, but in aerospace, we can put this on premise as well. So you have the flexibility of doing it either way. Okay, another one. How do you configuration control the various forms over time, such as how do you show PFMEA Rev A versus Rev B? Good question. Right now, the way it's set up, and I'm going to go back into a project, is again, this was another thing the volunteers went through. Are we going to do document authoring? Are we going to do documents configuration control? The answer was no, but we do need to do it. So how you do it is, you saw how I ran the PFMEA report. I'll just continue to use that as an example. When I go into the task for any of these documents, a process flow or dimensional results, the idea is you're doing rev control by attaching that to the task. So you'd have what did I pick again? A process flow as of 8/26/2019. If you went in and modified it and changed it, then you go in and say, and publish another one and say, here's the updated one. So the hierarchy of the actual ones are being done personally. Now, the thing we're still working on, I'd love to hear your feedback on this. With that all being said, the database does keep a detailed record of who changed what when. So there's some more detail around what was changed and who changed it and how they changed it. To be honest with you, what we're wrestling with is there's so much information here. We're trying to figure out what is the most meaningful way to present that to you. So there is other change control. I know that was hopefully a good answer to your question. Okay, I see you can export to Excel. Can you import to Excel? Yes, not everywhere. So let's go ahead and show you that. Let's go into parts again. We haven't been there in a while. So if I go into a demo part, or let's just pick another one, a standard part, anywhere in the app that you see this up arrow, whether it's in the part screen, whether it's an admin on the other characteristics, this is where you can upload product characteristics, process, and ops. So if I click on that, there's 3 ways to upload. You can just type it in, which technically is an upload, but you can copy and paste. And the columns you need are number, ID, characteristics, spec tolerance, and class. And again, the class is the critical items and key characteristics that we went through. Or you just pick a file. So whether you cut and paste from the file or copy from the file, it doesn't really matter. But that's how you can import them. Now, one of the other questions that gets asked is, can I import old forms? Can I import old FMEAs or old process flows or control plans? We spent about an hour on that, or I'm sorry, more a day on that with the volunteers. Of course, initially, nobody wants to do work over or see work over, but when it came down to it, they weren't confident that the data that they wanted to import had been validated and was right or correct. This ability to have inconsistent op numbers, to have information in the process flow that's not in the PFMEA, all those things that they were trying to solve that they didn't like about Excel, they realized that if we imported it, you're basically importing a mess. So what they said was, if I can kind of put up together some generic parts that I can file save as or copy, and I want to make sure we go and show you how to do that into the system. So I want to add one. Of course, you can just type and add one in. If I want to copy, pick up this one, hit add. I can either copy direct, I can copy revisions and keep the same one. So a lot of capability on the file save. If you give me that, and I can set up master parts and master projects, we're happy. So the answer to is, can I bring in other ones? The answer is no. I can import customers. Let's go back to admin. I can import customers, suppliers. I can import parts. Again, almost all of these have the, when I add, I can add new. So there's a lot of importing capability that's been put together. Okay. Security. Is there robust security on it? And the answer is probably not, depending on the size of your company. The only security that the volunteers wanted was the ability to manage multiple locations. And they said, if I'm in the Cleveland plant, I can only see the Cleveland data. I can't see Beijing or Mexico. But if you tell me I can see Cleveland and Beijing, I can see that. So that was it. Once I'm in there, I can edit, view, delete, do anything I want. So if you look at a user and you go into Cache, and this is where I can tag you as an admin user or a standard user. That's where you can tag multiple plants and assignments to them. I want to make sure I'm getting your questions. Sorry, that window disappeared on me. Let me bring it back real quick. Okay. All right, this kind of followed from the person who just asked me about importing old records. The follow-up question was, how do you migrate from another system then? And this question is kind of the same, whether it's migrating from an old ERP, from an old QMS or whatever. And we don't necessarily have time to go through it in detail. I'd be happy to talk to you offline about it. But long story short, you got to decide what's important, what's critical, what's going to move. And I have had some of the early adopters of the software say, I'm going to take those old files, I'm going to create a project on it, and I'm going to attach those files to a project right here, because that will give me the ability to search and find it, to copy it and retrieve it and see all that. It'll get me out of the K drive. I can say, show me everything by location, show me everything by partner. It'll give me a good step forward. But if I can just get the old files into the system that I can manage, that was kind of their answer to it. Time-wise, let's toggle back to the slide deck real quick. There are some more questions coming in. Please go ahead and type them in if you have them, but I want to make sure time-wise I don't keep you too late. So let's go back to the presentation real quick. This is a comment about IAQG. From somebody who's been hanging around in automotive and aerospace simultaneously, Aerospace and the IAQG is a phenomenal resource. The amount of content they give you and the amount of volunteers that have been working to put it together, and by the way, it's all free. If you don't know about it, you need to go there. You need to go in there after this webinar, log in, and look at the resources and what they give you. Again, unbelievable website. Actually, one of the attachments that is on this webinar you can download right now is a APQP PPAP manual. Again, directly from the SCMH website. It's free. It's a great document. Leverage them, use it. The reason I switched over to the slides is this next question was about that. So we already talked about software deployment, on-premise or hosted, your call, your decision. And pricing model can be based by concurrent user, or depending on the size of your company, it can be enterprise level. Again, a lot of flexibility on this. But this was an interesting question that came up. Of course, we can customize to meet your needs. Yes, we can integrate with your other apps. Yes, we can help you with setup and configuration. But the question was, can we license source code and do the customization by ourselves? And I guess the answer is yes. Yeah, if you like this and it's something that you're trying to develop internally and you'd like to not start from scratch, send me an email, give me a call, and let's talk about it, how that might be able to work out for you. So next steps, again, would love to hear from you about your thoughts and ideas on it. If you'd like to redo this just with your company, where we can have the phone lines open and you can have a conversation back and forth and we can take more time to go through it, that'd be great. Of course, in any of these things, how do we do it now? What do we like and not like about it? If we took a step this direction, what are the benefits? Because they got to outweigh the cost, or else we're not going to do it. And that's how we quickly get to a go, no-go decision. So there's a couple more questions. We've got a little more time left. I want to make sure we address those. Let's see. I scroll through them to get to them. Multiple locations we talked about briefly. Not all the volunteers that build it, the tier 2s and smallers, had multiple plants, but if you do have multiple plants, yes, it can support that. And again, the security is based on, if I'm assigned Cleveland, I can only see Cleveland data. If I'm corporate and I want to see Cleveland and Beijing and Mexico City, and I'm tagged all three of those, I can see all of them. Very, very basic, but another follow-up location just came in is, so if you're customized for us, can you add to your LDAP security system? And the answer is yes. Again, that's a customized thing connecting to yours. But that would give you the more robust capability of who designed what and who edited and treated and all that. Now remember, we have a history log. So we know who went in and changed what, when, and what they changed. And the reason I'm going to go back to a slide just to remind you of it. This is a slide I want you to be careful about, because as soon as we start, I don't want to say over-engineering, because again, these apps are required for the people doing the airplane design, the helicopter design, the complete system DFA, even the engine design. But you know the engine manufacturers, they create a separate standard, AS13004, that said, okay, for all our suppliers, we want you to do this, PFMEA process flow and control plan. DFMEA is our responsibility, this is yours. The reason I went back to this slide is, if you get too big and you get too complicated, I guarantee you they're going back to Excel. In fact, here's a story I want to share with you, and then we'll call it a webinar. One of the volunteers who first showed up, remember, the requirement was for me to manage the project in automotive, no OEMs, no tier 1s, and I forgot to mention this in my intro, no software companies. All I wanted to hear was voice of the customer, companies trying to do this in Excel, what do they want, and more importantly, what do they don't want. Anyhow, one of the persons showed up, and they said, well, we have one of those enterprise apps, and it does all this. It does all the forms, it does DFMEA, process flow control. It's already tied together. You're wasting your time. We don't need it. Now, as a guy who grew up in the plant early on as a co-op student and was always trained to go out to the plant and see what's going on, my follow-up question is executive. By the way, this is a VP of quality from a very large company. I said, can I talk to the person that does this form generation, everything is described, the person who does it every day? And this particular executive who was accompanying another, anyhow, they didn't do it. I talked to him. Guess what the answer was? I said, all right, so how do you author the PFMEA process flow control plan? He goes, oh, I do it all in Excel, and then I upload it into this, there's an ERP app, and I upload it. So executive perceptions of what they bought, what it does, needs to be verified. Every executive knows we just spent a lot of money on this thing and it better work. What they don't know is the day-to-day hands-on stuff, that the reality of how people do this. So with that said, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Again, please take advantage of IAQG. It's an unbelievable, great organization. It's a phenomenal website with all sorts of free material. If you'd like to know more, or you have a question or any feedback, which would be greatly appreciated, please call me at, email me first, especially for international, jmc@pproso.com. One other comment is, I know we have some consulting organizations on the call today. I'm very interested in working with consulting partners, especially globally. So if you have an interest in that from what you saw, send me an email as well. With that, thank you all for your time. Appreciate it, and hope to hear from you soon.